Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Gooler Loeb.
Hey everyone. I am so delighted to introduce today's guest, Margaret Andrews. Margaret is the author of Manage Yourself to Lead Others: Why Great Leadership Begins with Self-Understanding. She's a seasoned executive, academic leader, speaker, and instructor. She has created and teaches a variety of leadership courses and professional and executive programs at Harvard University, and is the founder of the Mylo Center, MYLO, a private leadership development firm. Her clients include Amazon, Citi, Continental, Walmart, Wayfair, and the United Nations. And she lives in Brookline, Massachusetts. She's my neighbor. Please join me in welcoming Margaret Andrews.
Thank you so
Welcome,
much.
Margaret.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Now, I spelled out Mylo because it's all in caps here. Is that an acronym?
It is for Manage Yourself to Lead Others, or Managing, which is the name of the book, and
Right.
Leading Others, which is the name of the class at Harvard. So
I got that. How did I not connect the dots? Because you're the first person I've spoken to this morning. So, Margaret, on Work from the Inside Out, we love to begin at the beginning. So take us back to your formative years and how they may or may not have informed what you're doing today.
yeah, I was born at UCLA Medical Center. And I always like to say I was born on a college campus, so I was destined to return. I spent my childhood in Southern California, and I had a very normal childhood. I was a swimmer and swam competitively up until part of the time through high school. So I went to school at UC Berkeley, and after that was a CPA in San Francisco. I worked for Deloitte on the tax side. And after about 4 years, I decided that I didn't want to do that, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I did what was very popular at that time, and I went back to business school. So I went to the MIT Sloan School of Management. Another part of my backstory, and that is that my parents both went to MIT as undergrads. That's where they met. They got married at the MIT chapel. And so I like to say that the culture of MIT is the culture of my family. Therefore, when I got to MIT, which I had never been there before, I just felt immediately at home. And of course, I didn't understand it at the time, but I thought, yeah, that's why. It's because you've grown up with that sort of hard work mentality. Nothing is impossible. It just takes a little bit longer. And so, yeah, it was a great place to be.
Was there an area of focus that you studied at MIT when you were there?
Yeah, so I was in the business school, and I remember that there's some 6 questions that I often use to help people understand themselves, and one of them is who and whose thinking has influenced you, which is, of course, a humongous question, and lots of people do. But I say it can even be strangers, and for me, there was a stranger that influenced me, and it was somebody that I met. I have no idea what his name was. I met him when I was going through recruiting at Berkeley. And he asked me what I was going to do. And I said, I'm going to become a CPA, and I'm probably going to go on the tax side. And he looked at me and he said, if I could give you one piece of advice, I would say stay as broad as you can for as long as you can in your career. And I remember thinking, that's interesting. Of course, I didn't take that advice. And
You remembered it.
but I remembered it. And so when I was at MIT, that was what I wanted to do. And so I thought about that and said, what is as broad as I could be for as long as I could be? And it was to go into consulting, and it was in particular strategy consulting. And it was a great decision because I worked for a wonderful firm, great people, and I saw lots of different types of organizations, different industries, different problems, etc. It was constantly learning all the time, which is something I really enjoy. It really set me up well, and it was great advice, but it took me several years to actually take it, and it turned out to be wonderful advice.
And so the consulting firm that you went to, I don't know if you want to tell us where, but
That's fine. It was called Mercer Management
Oh,
Consulting.
yeah.
And now they changed their name to Oliver Wyman.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And so they were fairly large?
So a lot of people know Mercer oftentimes because they're part of the same organization, but the Mercer, the big one, he's in HR consulting. So they do a lot of
Yes.
benefit plans and things like this.
Yeah.
Now, this is Mercer Management Consulting was the strategy
Uh-huh.
firm.
Okay.
And so that may have been behind the name change because
Mm.
everyone says, "Oh, I know you guys, you're HR consulting." It's no, that's a different one. Yeah.
I see. But still, you had the opportunity to really go broader there.
Oh, absolutely. It was great. I worked in oil and gas and telecom and consumer goods and all kinds of different things. So you saw
Mhm.
lots of different problems from different angles, different cultures that you were working in. It was fabulous.
Wow. It makes me think about consulting in all these different industries and the different nuances when you're diving into strategy for different industries. If you don't have some grounding within yourself, how do you step into all these different places where there's probably always things you just don't know?
Yes.
So the one thing you
Absolutely.
do have is that grounding or that basis to start from to engage with a client.
Yeah, and I think, it is true. One of the reasons why consulting can be very valuable for organizations is that consultants, for the most part, work in different industries, see different problems, and
Yeah.
therefore has a good idea of very different ways to approach the problem. And that could
Right.
be very valuable because as they sometimes don't see that, or sometimes they do see it, but don't know how would we do this. It was very helpful. And I will say that one of the things about consulting is that you are oftentimes working with people that have been in this industry or this company for decades. So they have knowledge that you're not going to acquire very quickly,
Right.
but you have knowledge that they're not going to acquire quickly. But to your point about understanding ourselves, is that I think that this is an important thing throughout our careers, but even more so as we advance in our careers and get more leadership responsibility, is really understanding and managing ourselves is the foundation for effectively leading others and leading organizations. It gives you a certain grounding, calmness, or understanding,
Yeah.
and therefore you're just less buffeted by
Right.
every wind that blows.
Exactly. Exactly. And you can own your perspective on things and not take everything in from around you on the outside and think that it's about you in some way too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody's different, and in general, that's a good thing.
We need that variety. So how long were you with Mercer?
I was with them 5 years
Mm.
and had 2 different types of projects that always attracted me,
Mm.
and one of them was around marketing. Really enjoyed marketing, and the other was around management development or executive education, that a lot of times after we would help an organization with a new strategy, they would say, "Okay, now we need to help people understand this, et cetera," and so then we would create these more executive and professional development programs, and I really liked both. I decided I wanted to do one of them, and I joined a financial services firm in the marketing area and did that for a couple of years. And then through a series of lucky accidents, I ended up running the MBA program at MIT. And it was one of those things. And boy, lucky accidents and unlucky accidents oftentimes play a role in our life. And this one was an incredibly lucky one. And it was that they had MIT Sloan, one of the deans there had called me and said, "Hey, you're an alum. You were always very active on campus, and we're redoing our curriculum, and we would love to have some alumni input into this curriculum since you've been out in the workforce for a while. So would you be willing to join this team?" And I said, "Sure." We met every week. I can't remember what day it was, but it was 7:30 in the morning.
Oh,
I remember what time. I do remember what time it was. And so anyway, after one of these meetings, I just stopped by somebody's office, somebody that I used to know when I was on campus and hadn't seen for a long time. And long story short, we had a conversation and was just catching up and everything. And at near the end of the conversation, he said, "So what can I do for you?" And I said, "Nothing. I was just here to say hello and just catch up." And he said, "Oh, I thought you were here about the job." And I said, "What job?" And he said, "We're hiring somebody to run the MBA program, admissions, student affairs, career development." And I thought you were calling about that. And I said, oh my gosh, now I am. And he said, well, you better hurry because we had hired an executive search firm and we have surfaced 10 candidates and we're interviewing them next week. And so I just emailed everybody I knew there that could potentially help me. And I said, I got to be on that list. And so I walked on that list as candidate number 11 and walked out with the job.
Wow.
But talk about a lucky accident, right? Had I not stopped by and said
That's right.
hello to that with no agenda other than to catch up, I never would have heard about it.
Those stories just always, to me, those are the ones you want to put a pin in, because how often do we almost argue with ourselves? Should I go say hello? Shouldn't I? Should I call this one? Shouldn't I? And I always say to people, if you don't do it, the answer is always no. Do it. You
Mhm.
never know what will come of that. And you don't do it with the intention that something will come of it. You just do it because it occurred to you to do it.
And it's somebody that you share something in common with, an experience or something like that, and you liked this person. So therefore, why would you not want to keep in touch with them?
Exactly. And at the time, were you thinking about a new opportunity?
I was at that
Oh, you
time.
were?
I
Okay.
was actually, and it was just a perfect, you wanna say perfect storm, but a positive storm,
Sure.
right? Where I found out about this just at the time where I was thinking, "Okay, I think what is next for me?" And I
Yeah.
thought, "Oh, absolutely. This is absolutely what is next for me." But
Wow.
I was not what they were looking for.
Really?
I had not been in higher ed. I'd never worked in higher ed, and they wanted somebody that worked in higher ed, but I convinced them, so.
You must be very compelling then.
When I really want something,
Yeah.
I can be compelling, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So, how long did you run the program at MIT?
I think it was
Wow.
about 7
Okay.
years, yeah. It was a great job, I really enjoyed it, and part of it was doing turnarounds of different units, making them
Oh.
better, and I really liked that. After 7 years, I thought, "Well, I've turned around a lot of different things, and I really like this."
Mm.
So I went to a firm that did this in higher education
Oh.
and realized I could do this pretty well on my own. So I went off on my own and did that, essentially strategy and marketing consultant in higher ed, and did that for truly on and off for a very long time. Then 3 people sent the same job description within 2 days. It was for a job at Harvard. And I thought, there's a sign that 3 people sent you the same job description. So I called about it, et cetera, and I ended up being the associate dean for management programs in the Division of Continuing Ed, and did that for 6 years or so, and super enjoyed it, and that's where I started teaching, and really found that teaching is something I really enjoy because,
Mm.
as somebody once said, "Teaching, you get to touch the future," and I think that that's
Ooh.
really, really true, and it was all about leadership, and leadership makes a big difference in people's lives. When it's good, it's super helpful, and when it's bad, it's soul crushing.
Yes.
So, if we can improve the craft of leadership even
Yeah.
a little bit,
Yeah.
I think it makes the world a better place.
Oh, I love the way you talk about that, even the craft of leadership. It is a craft, isn't it? Because
It is.
as a leader, you're always overseeing change, and the parts are always moving around. You can't just do the same thing you did last year thinking you're going to get the same results, right?
Absolutely. The people are not the same, the environment is not the same, and so it's really, hearing Ed Catmull, who used to run Pixar, one time, and he said that people used to ask him, "Hey, now that you're not making those animated movies anymore, how does it feel to not be on the creative side anymore?" And he said he was always very surprised by that question because he said he thinks of leadership as being one of the most creative things you can do because he said people are different and you have to figure out, right? It's very creative. How do I work with this person? How do I work with this group of people to do this type of project?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, absolutely. Why do we not consider leadership a very creative aspect?
Well, I think putting that out there in that perspective is very important. There are probably many leaders, they say it's lonely at the top. And I think those are the leaders, and it happens, where they start to just go inward, but not outward at the same time. And I'm thinking about the work from the inside out theme, which is still you have to go outward in order to go inward, reflecting and then figuring out what is it that you want to bring out from within. And that creative piece is so important rather than going inward and staying there and thinking nobody cares, about what I think or what decisions or nobody understands me kind of feeling.
Yeah, I do think it is lonely at the top as well because
Yeah.
that you have fewer people that you can really talk to, and you have fewer people that will tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And people can get very isolated on one hand, but
Mhm.
also fawned over. Whatever idea you have is great. And
Yeah.
let's be real, not all of our ideas are great.
Yeah.
But I think one of the groups that I really like working with the most are people that are experienced managers, middle to sometimes very senior managers
Mhm.
that have hit a wall and they realize, oh gosh, what I used to do is not working anymore.
Yeah.
And therefore, they are absolutely open to thinking differently about things. And because when you hit that wall, it hurts and
Yeah.
nobody wants to keep doing that. So they're
Right.
much more open to it.
Yeah. And something that I've done is work with groups of people in the middle who are all in different areas of a company. And then they realize, oh, I'm not the only one dealing with this.
Absolutely.
And they can share ideas and come back and talk about how it went and realize, oh, this goes on everywhere.
I absolutely. When I teach a program, an open enrollment program, I have people from all over, literally all over the world, but
Yes.
also financial services and the military, not
Yeah.
for profits, higher education, basically a tech, everything. And so people oftentimes come in thinking in my organization, it's
Right.
so different. And I think, yeah, culturally it is and certain things, but the problems we face are very similar.
Yes. Yeah. They really are. It's just how you're tactically going to go about dealing with them might be different, but the mindset you need isn't all that different.
No, it really isn't, and that's where I think when I talk about sometimes you have to slow down to speed up, right? And
Mhm.
part of that is taking the
Mhm.
time to really understand yourself and then to try to figure out, okay, what do I need to do
Yeah.
in order to get to this next level, this new
Yeah.
level of me? It's
Mhm.
still you, but
Yeah.
it is an evolving. We evolve all the time. We're not
Yeah.
the same as we were when we were 18 or 28 or whatever.
Well, thank
Um,
goodness.
Thank goodness, exactly, exactly. And we will continue to evolve,
Yeah.
but more deliberately, and
Yeah.
that's really what it's about.
So I just want to roll back the tape. Now I'm aging myself a little bit. Just like I'm thinking about the trajectory of all the things that you've done in your career. And it sounds like everything evolved. One thing led to the next. You reached a juncture each time where you decided it was time for a change, but you also discovered other things about yourself that you wanted to do, and you found your way into those things. And I'm not saying it was all smooth as butter each time, but it sounds like you had some clarity about yourself each time that you went to make a move, and you also invested many years in each situation. Was it that smooth?
Oh gosh, nothing is ever smooth. And it's funny because when we look at people, whether it's famous CEOs or political or military leaders or any of these things, we often think, wow,
Yeah.
amazing success. I will tell you that any of them have had lots of setbacks in their life. They just
Yeah.
got up, dusted themselves off, and kept going.
Yeah.
But I would say I think maybe, especially earlier in my career, it wasn't necessarily that I knew myself that well. It was that I
Mhm.
was curious and I was
Ah.
interested in something, and so I that's something I have always done is if I'm curious about something, I follow it and sometimes figure out that's not what I want or that was just enough just
Mhm.
to take care of that curiosity. But other times I get more into it. And honestly, that's how lots of my career has unfolded because if you're interested in something, you have this intrinsic motivation
Yes.
And I also teach a class called Creativity and Innovation. And that's a big part of it is what makes us creative is intrinsic motivation, is being curious about the problem and wanting to solve the problem, not thinking about the reward of it. So
Yeah.
it's internal to you.
I love what you just said about this, that it's not that I knew myself that well. It was that I was curious because I've found that as I've been interviewing people across so many different changes in their lives, the one thread I've seen that took people from one place to the next, and usually from one place to something maybe a little more satisfying, or at least a place of discovery of what they wanted and didn't want, was always curiosity.
I think that is true, but I think there's another part to it that
Yeah.
sometimes people don't talk about, and that is a willingness to take a risk and
Yes.
to leave what you know and what is perhaps comfortable and to try something new. And that can be done so many different ways. It can be done by experimenting, taking a class, reading a book about it, talking to somebody, doing volunteer work in that, all different ways.
Right.
Or it can be just, I'm going to jump, right? I'm going to get a job in that area or whatever it is. So
Yeah.
I think it's not just curiosity, but it's also a willingness to take a risk. And sometimes that risk is being really bad at something in the beginning.
Yeah.
And that's never very fun. I remember the first time I created the class, Managing Yourself and Leading Others, and the first time I taught it, I look back at some of the slides and things that I use for that, and it's cringeworthy at this point. But the bones of the class are the same. The way that I taught it evolved very rapidly because I
Really?
remember, yeah, in the very beginning, the common feedback that I got in the class was this content is great, but we'd really like to hear more stories, in particular, some of your stories, meaning my stories. And I remember thinking, who wants to hear my stories? That's pretty, let's talk about other people.
Yeah.
And then I realized, no, that's what connects you with the content. That's what connects you with the person that is sharing this content
That's
with
right.
you. And
That's
so
right.
that evolved quite a bit.
Yeah. Oh, that's music to my ears. I find that people do want to hear our stories and then they can reflect off of those stories and either find something relatable in it or just reflect off of it and it gives them some other thoughts and ideas about what they might want to do for
And I
themselves.
Yeah, and I also think too, it shows them that it's not just everybody always thinks, "Oh gosh, I'm not good at this," or whatever, and it's shameful, and I don't want to admit it to other people. So when you tell people about the times that you totally messed up,
Yeah.
they relax. You can see their shoulders go down, right?
Yeah.
Oh, if they laugh, of course, because now, in hindsight, it's funny, but it wasn't very funny at the time.
Right.
And they realize, "Oh gosh, it's not just me. This is part of the process." Yes, it's just part of the process.
And I think the older we get, or I will speak for myself, even when I do mess up, I can laugh even quicker than I used to be able to.
I think that's true. We don't take ourselves quite as seriously as we did.
No, it's a waste of time to do that, I think. So you were the associate dean for 6 years, and then where did you go from there?
I went to work for another business school as their vice provost and just decided I really miss as much as I actually really like academic administration. Some people, you either like it or you don't like it. As a friend of mine who was a faculty member at Harvard told me, he said, "Are you sure you want these jobs?" He said, "You're right between the students and the faculty." Was that if it, then sometimes that can be a tough place to be. And he's told me, he said, "You'll know you're doing a good job when neither side loves you." And there were, because if either side loves you, it means that you're too close on that side. And I remember a few times thinking, I'm doing a great job because both sides really don't like me right now. But I like it. It's solving a big complex problem all the time with moving parts. So I have liked doing that very much.
And you're not still there now, are you?
No, what I'm doing is I am still teaching at Harvard. I teach several different classes and professional and executive programs through a couple different divisions or schools at Harvard.
Yeah.
And I also teach in private clients and things like that.
And you have your own firm.
Exactly.
And then you decided to write a book. Tell us about What made you decide to write a book?
To be honest, I never really thought about writing a book until a few years ago. And I will say that lots of times people have something that's in them that just has to come out. And
Yes.
for me, that was the class. The class just absolutely had to be born. I oftentimes think of that scene in the movie Alien where the alien comes out of that person's chest.
Yes.
Because that's like the class with me. It had to come out. And so I did that class and I've been teaching it for close to 20 years now. And it's very popular, right? It has a wait list any
Yes.
time. And then it was probably about 10 years ago, maybe a little more, I started this series of professional development programs. And I took that class and boiled it down. And it's been the most popular professional development program at Harvard right now. And so then I created a speech around it, which resonates with a lot of different audiences. And so I just thought, what would be next each time? So the class has a certain number of people that you can teach each year, and those professional development programs get wider. The speech is wider, and the book is wider. So it was just a way it was taking it out into those concentric circles, if you will.
Yeah. And then you thought, why not turn it into a book?
Yeah, absolutely. And so many people say, that must have been so easy because you've been teaching this for a long time. And I said, oh no, it was so hard because teaching and writing are so different. And also in a classroom, if you can see somebody doesn't get it or was a little confused or something, you can say it a different way. But you don't have that opportunity in a book. You have to say it in a way that will resonate or make them understand
Right.
immediately. And
Right.
so it took a long time.
Yeah. Well, and you're busy doing other things as well. You didn't just say, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to do nothing else while I'm doing this. It's a beautiful book. And I don't say that like you put it in the art history section of the bookstore, but I say it's beautiful because it really taps into the heart and soul of what we need to be solid leaders and to know ourselves and really feel comfortable in our own skin and do great work and lead teams, lead organizations. But also, and I mentioned this to you before we turned on the record button, to lead ourselves. In this day and age, there's no guarantees for anything. We don't have employers anymore that keep us on for 30 years and let us retire with a gold watch. If we don't lead ourselves through our own careers, if we don't take the time to know ourselves and lead ourselves through our careers, we're going to be struggling that much more. And I think a book like yours gives people a lot of pathways and ways of looking at how to take the best of yourself and really exercise that, both in the context of how you can work with others, lead others, but also work with yourself. I love this. The first line in the book description says, this book helps you to not just follow best practices, but to be a best practice. And I think being a best practice for yourself is something that some people struggle to get to their entire lives. Your book is a guide for people to really get there. I can't say enough great things about it. The thing that I see with a lot of clients I work with is people who have the knowledge, the skills, the technical know-how to do the work they're doing, and they still step into leadership roles or roles with a lot of responsibility and still don't have their feet planted firmly on the ground, don't feel confident to lead teams or to engage cross-functionally with a sense of presence or confidence. And that's what I really appreciate about your book, because it gives people the frameworks and the tools to connect better with themselves in order to then carry themselves through and be the leader they want to be.
Oh, thank you. That was the hope, right? Because we all are different. We have similarities, of course, lots of similarities, but we also have differences. And with leadership, you bring all of yourself to it, whether you know it or not. And that's the thing then that's why going back and understanding the people and ideas and situations that have influenced us and perhaps changed us throughout our lives, our values, our definition of success, feedback we've received over the years.
Yeah.
When you put it all together, you get a more complete picture of, gosh, who am I? How was I formed? And which of these ideas maybe serve me well or not anymore?
Exactly.
And I oftentimes think of a great quote by the author C.S. Lewis that said, "You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending." And I think that is such a great quote because it shows you how much agency you actually do have. That you can't change the past, right? And lots of people have things in their past that were very hurtful or harmful to them.
Yeah.
And it doesn't absolutely need to define your future, right? That you can take what you have and say, okay, where do I want to take this?
Right.
And I make it sound so easy. Of course
Right.
not, right?
Right.
But the underlying sentiment is absolutely true.
Right. And to then think about what resources people do you have available to help you to move beyond those old stories or the past to get to that next place. It's not just about, I think too often we think we have to do it all ourselves. And that's where people, I think, really get lost. And when they start to be more inclusive of others in their journey, they can draw from those resources and also give to those resources. And it's much richer. It really creates more movement forward.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is very true because I think a lot of very high achieving people do not want to ask for help, have a real hard time with that. And the thing is that we all need a little bit of help sometimes.
Yeah, or just another perspective. I think there's so many ways that it's not even about saying, oh, I need help, I'm helpless. It's more, I have an idea. I'm not sure it's the best idea. I'd love to hear other ideas. I just want another perspective.
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing is that when you're working on a new skill or behavior, it's very helpful to let other people know. And very oftentimes people will say, it'll make me look weak or I'm not a good leader if I say I'm working on this. And, and I tell them these people that work with you, they already know what you should be working on.
Yeah.
And so if you say, hey, I'm working on becoming a better listener, everybody in your orbit is going, thank goodness. Right. And so they want to help you get better because it helps them too.
Yeah. And it humanizes you and they admire that you're sharing that you've included them and trusted them with that information, that you're saying, I'm working on something and I want to include you in my learning. Show them that you're a learner too. It sounds so simple, but people really have a hard time with that.
They have a hard time, I think, with any form of vulnerability of showing that we are human, not perfect. Those you could put not perfect equals human, right? So we all are human. None of us are perfect. All of us have had to evolve. And actually, to continue growing, we're going to continue to evolve.
But I understand why it's a tough line to toe, because if you're a leader of an organization and people look to you for guidance, decisiveness, and direction, it's a fine line between sharing that you're working on something or maybe there's something you don't know, and yet you want people to some degree to lean in and follow your lead and trust that. And so the way that you express where your learning curve is or where your learning edge is, but also reassure them or take a solid stance on certain positions that you have to, it can feel like a very fine line or like you're being almost a Jekyll and Hyde in some ways. I understand there's a difficulty, and it's probably a skill almost that you have to work on for a while. And like you said earlier, almost take a risk with it.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it is. There's always a fine line.
Yeah.
That's what makes leadership so difficult.
Yeah.
And also the line is in different places for different people. And
Right.
that's what makes it also very difficult.
Right. I wanted to know, as you've been teaching and you've got the book out now, what are some of the key things that you see in people trying to discover themselves or manage themselves? What are the big areas or the common areas that where people, I don't want to say struggle necessarily, but the common areas that people bring up in terms of their development as leaders?
Yeah, I would say very oftentimes it comes back to something that I say, and I didn't even realize that I always said it until people would come up to me afterwards and say, "Wow, when you said that, that really made a big difference. It really put it in perspective." And that is that we judge ourselves by our intentions, and other people judge us by our behaviors.
Huh.
So I think a lot of times people, when they're leading others, are feel misunderstood because I really mean, how come my team doesn't know that, or
Mhm.
whatever? They think I either have it out for them or lack empathy. And very oftentimes it comes down to, gosh, I have these great intentions, but how come people don't get that? And it's because if our behaviors, people, as I say, people judge us by our behaviors. Think about anybody you've worked with. I'll say that recognizing that what I just said was very helpful for me in realizing that some of the people that I may have worked with in the past, some of the bosses that I've had that I might have said, "Oh, they were terrible bosses."
Yeah.
Actually, they were learning, right? And that they may have had this mismatch in their intentions and their behaviors, and that they probably had very good intentions, but their behaviors didn't match. And therefore, of course, I judged them by their behaviors, but
Right.
it gave me a little bit more insight into that. Okay, they're human too,
Right.
just as other people are gonna judge us by our behaviors.
Right.
So we have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I've heard the expression many times to a point where it starts to sound a little bit trite. They had an unintended impact.
Positive or negative, yeah.
Usually it comes up when it's negative, but it does seem like that's a key point when people don't realize the weight of the impact that their behaviors have. They think their behaviors have the same impact that other people's behaviors do. And when you're, let's say, the leader of an organization, you can sneeze in one direction and that's going to have way more impact than someone else who did the same thing. And
Yes.
it needs to be pointed out that not to make you super self-conscious, but understand that when you say or do something in a certain way, it's almost magnified.
True, and the higher in an organization you are, the more true that is. Everybody is watching everything that you do, trying to pick up clues or listening to your tone of voice and all
Yeah.
of these things. And again, as you say, not to make you self-conscious, but just to recognize that.
And be aware and come up with some strategies to communicate with people what you're thinking, not just what you're doing. And that may match up the intention with the behavior a little bit better, I
Yeah.
think.
Because it is true that we measure a lot of leadership by their impact, right?
Mhm.
Their results and things like that. But as we get higher levels in our career, higher levels of leadership, we are doing work with and through other people. And therefore, if we can't understand ourselves and manage ourselves, we can't understand and develop other people. And therefore, our behaviors impact the way we behave with other people. We're going to get better or worse results over time. May not come out immediately, but over
Yeah.
time it does.
What would you say looking forward, or even looking at where we are right now and thinking about the kinds of things we read about in the media, all the different, let's say, leadership decisions that are being made? You have to be in the office so many days, whereas up till now, people were allowed to work from home, or different kinds of, I'd say, leadership messages. And it seems like there's been a lot of shifts since COVID in terms of how leaders need to function. It seemed to me like during COVID, there was a real crisis in leadership and how to really manage through a period of time that people had never seen before. And so they really had to make quick and big adjustments. And now they're trying to readjust that. And it does seem clunky to me. I'm just curious what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, in terms of the return to office things, I think that there's a lot going on there. And I also teach a course in culture. And I do think that it is harder to maintain a culture when you are distant, that we get to know each other, we are socialized into a culture, and that when we don't see each other often, that it is harder. So I do think that there is a pretty strong argument on culture. Also, by the way, on creativity and innovation. Because if we don't spend some time together, our ideas aren't going to rub off on each other. We're not going to have those chance encounters. So I think that this whole thing is truly a paradox here. It's not, should we all be work from home or all be in the office? It's some sort of how do we solve for both of those? Maintaining what we really want in a culture and in innovation and these kinds of things, where also managing to give people the flexibility that they need.
Because
And
that's become a very high value. It always was a value for people, but I think it's become an even higher value.
I think that's true, and it just seems like it's going to be different in different types of organizations.
Sure.
The answer is gonna be quite different, and so just because your competitor does it, doesn't mean that's what you should do, whichever
Yeah.
way we're looking at this. So I think it's hard, and so I have a lot of empathy for people that are making these decisions. It also goes to another thing that I think about leadership is that not every decision that you make is gonna make everybody happy.
Oh,
But that's actually not our job as a leader to make everyone happy. It is really to get results, but if you continually make people unhappy, you will actually undermine the results that you're getting. You have to figure this out, and
yeah.
I don't think that there is a silver bullet here.
No.
I think that it's gonna be different, and has the nature of a paradox, meaning that there's no stable solution. It's a dynamic thing. You're gonna have to make adjustments as you go. And I think in truth, we're seeing some of that. That sometimes it was, okay, everybody's in the office 2 days, and now it's 3 days or 4 days or something like that. That we're realizing, okay, what's the benefit of this? What's the drawback of
Right.
this? And so I don't think it's an easy answer.
No.
It feels like it is, I think, and lots of times people are saying, "I don't like this," and I get it with the commute. I've had some pretty bad commutes in my life.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a difficult decision, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of factors that go into that, but when you're the one making the decision, the kudos and the blame is gonna end up with you, and so you have to just think through that decision and all of the repercussions, the positive and the negative.
And I think the other thing I've seen is how those decisions get communicated, the rationale behind them. Not that you have to explain everything, but it does help if you can give people some information in that way. Because I work with a lot of people who are now looking for that flexibility and saying, I will only look at remote jobs. And yet I think you're making a really good point. Given that this is your area of depth, I was curious what your perspective on that was. And so if somebody wanted to learn even more about your work, what would be the best way for them to find you? We'll have
Yeah.
all of your links and everything in the show notes, but what's the number one best way?
Yeah, I'll give you 2 in
Okay.
order, though. The first
Sure.
one is probably to connect through LinkedIn. That is
Okay.
I don't do a lot of social media, but that's one place where I do hang out a little bit, and I'm Margaret C. Andrews on LinkedIn. And the other is just somehow through my website if you wanna connect with me, and that is margaretandrews.com.
Oh, great.
Yeah, no C in that one, although I think that'll get you there too.
Great. All right. And wrapping up, we always end with this question, and that is, you've made a wide range of transitions throughout your career. We have a lot of people listening here who are considering their potential next move. What would be a key piece of advice you would give someone who is doing that kind of self-reflection and thinking about what their next move is?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think perhaps in this situation, I would say is that sometimes you do have to slow down to speed up. That taking the time to think about these reflective questions and to understand what motivates you, what in your past has influenced the way that you lead or think about things or approach people or any of these things, is that going internal before we go external is very helpful. And the other part of that is that if you answer these types of questions in a high-level, cursory, rushed manner, you will get high-level, cursory insights. If you spend more time on it, this is the classic thing of what you put in is what you get out.
That makes a lot of sense. Of course, you're preaching to the choir here. Work from the inside out.
Yes,
Well, Margaret, that's very helpful. I think people need those reminders. I think people know those things, but I don't know that they practice them. Hopefully, they can set those intentions and then work that through in their behaviors, as we said. Margaret, thank you so much for being here today. I can't encourage people enough to get their hands on your book, whether you are leading an organization, hoping to lead, or leading yourself, manage yourself to lead others. It's a fantastic book, very accessible. Please avail yourself of it. And thanks again, Margaret.
Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of my interview with Margaret Andrews. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygoolerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 290. And while you're there, you can also subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. Did you know that ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts can help this podcast reach more people? Please help me to inspire more people to move their careers in meaningful directions by clicking on the Apple Podcasts button right there, and then leave an honest rating and brief review. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out, Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or through your local library. You can also help sustain this podcast by buying me a cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TammyGL. Since the podcast is self-funded, your support is acknowledged and appreciated. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.